Hello, I'm Natalie Kenway and I'm here for a COP28 video with Michelle and Juiced at EY. Thank you so much for joining me today. How is it in Dubai?
Going very well, I think.
Yes,
Michelle?
It's a lot warmer than it is in the UK.
I can imagine.
It's very busy, isn't it, Juiced?
Yes, so we escaped for a second the busy part, but it's really the last couple of days really stepped up in energy and busyness. So that's really positive, I would say.
And there's actually not even standing room, is there, at the EY pavilion? It's very, very busy.
Yeah, I mean, you both sound quite positive, optimistic. What have you taken from the announcement so far?
It's probably, we were talking about this before, it's probably too early and I don't mean to be unhelpful, but it's probably too early to give a view. I think we've got to see what comes out in aggregate before we can make any pronouncements on whether it's good or bad. But our sense, I think, is fair to say, is that this COP does seem to be making more progress, and it is more positive. I think there's more positivity around it and more hope, I guess, than maybe in previous recent COPs. I don't know.
Yeah, and if you look, I mean, I think you also need to look a little bit through the announcements, what happens on the ground. Was in a panel this morning with a number of financial services institutes, if you like, or institutions, so banks, and you see the desire to actually fund transition, to get in that, and we're mixing that then with incentives and the likes. So I think there's a genuine understanding of what's needed. There's a genuine kind of desire to get in the financing, which today's Finance Day. That's why it's really on the front of mind. But I think that's all very positive, and I see there are quite a lot of commitments made from individual private companies actually wanting to step in and make a difference. So I think that's really positive. Yes, I would love big announcements to come. So we're still kind of waiting for a few of those to come through to support us further.
But what's driving that? I think it's important to understand. It's not. I mean, yes, there is a desire to decarbonise and provide the right solutions for the environment, but also there is a real understanding here that that the underlying businesses will present greater risk if they are not fit for purpose in terms of sustainability. So there is a business need for this to happen. I think what we're hearing on the ground from the financial institutions in particular is that whilst they recognise that they need to invest in this area in order to de-risk their own businesses, there's a lot more that needs to be done in order for those initial investments, those upcoming investments themselves, to be de-risked. And it's that support that's needed from government in order to help that happen. So there is a need for greater policy determination around this, and that's what we're hearing on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, this is something I wanted to ask you about. There's obviously the Inflation Reduction Act in the US has been well received, I would say. Do you think we'll see similar rollouts in different countries after COP28?
I think what the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, has shown us is that it goes back to the de-risking point as well. Those sums of money, if you add the Green Deal funds to that, are very significant. You're well over 500 billion there. That's a lot of money to flow in. That is government backed, if you like. And so where there's some hesitation of maybe private, here you see that this is available and accessible. So I think, yes, you see that as an instrument that more countries will look at. I think on the EU side, what we noticed is as soon as the nations in Europe got a little bit more freedom to locally actually fund with incentives, that was speeding up matters. So we'd be careful that these things are set up in a way that they're effective, accessible. And my only caution would be, it seems still a little bit of a big company play, and we need change at a large scale. We can't leave the smaller ones behind. And I think we're still seeing a little bit of complexity to apply. The last thing on that is what we're seeing from Inflation Reduction Act. Some of the tax credits are now made tradable. You can sell them to others. And that starts to create a different type of market. And I think that also allows smaller players to be involved a little bit more. So I think that's maturing a lot. We have good experience. And on our side, outside COP, we're really, really busy with that helping clients. So I think it's an area that I think can lead the way a little bit as the bigger policies come into play.
And you make a really good point there. This is about a transition, isn't it? And not all organisations can transition at the same rate as the larger ones. And it also goes to the point of countries as well, because not all countries have the financial wherewithal to introduce something akin to the IRA. And of course, this is what is coming out of COP, where those countries that are, in the global south predominantly are looking for help from other countries that are in a position to help them finance the kind of transition that is happening in the US and in Europe. So the transition is going to operate at different levels, depending on the kind of organisation you are and depending on what country you're in. But again, it goes to this real need for a global policy around some of this.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it's interesting what you said around the sort of developing economies, because I've read something about this being a COP that's more focused on directing capital towards those. Is that something that you would agree with so far?
Yes, absolutely. There is a lot what Yusuf was talking about in terms of what's happening in Europe. A lot of that is impacting the supply chain. Where is that supply chain coming from? It is coming from developing countries who are not necessarily in a position to deliver what their export markets require. And so if we want the transition to happen at the rate that we want it to happen at, and to the extent that we want it to happen to, there probably needs to be a lot more global support for those countries to enable them to, one, transition, but also importantly to remain instrumental to the global supply chain, which is an area you're really focused on, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I think that transparency, I had conversations also with people representing farmer communities, for instance. If you now look again at some rules that are happening on supply chain visibility, the need to be able to look all the way down to the farm and where something in the food sector has been grown, we don't have that level of transparency, and it sits to not fully, but to a large degree in developing countries. So I think that's important. I would say, as a little critical tone, in some of the panels on the financing of that and how much is going to the developing countries, there are also a few large pension funds in the room. They're all worried still. We had an insurance company that's trying to help with de-risking investing in developing countries where you have maybe unstable regimes, natural disasters happening. And can you do the classic investors find that too risky, or do they need help with that first kind of tranche of risk finance? And that part, I think we still have a little bit of way to go, if I'm honest.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you very much for sharing your insights on the ground. Great to chat with you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.